It dragged me into the forest. The memory of it is a raw, jagged thing in my mind, a physical scar etched onto my soul. Before that night, the woods behind my grandfather's house were a place of wonder, a green and sun-dappled kingdom I explored with the reckless abandon of a 7-year-old boy. I knew every mossy rock, every gnarled root that snaked across the path. But I didn't know the thing that lived deeper in, the thing that waited in the shadows between the ancient oaks. It was late August, the air thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. My grandfather had warned me, as he always did, "Don't you go past the old stone wall, hear me? That's not our land back there." I'd always obeyed, not out of fear, but out of respect. Grandpa Joe was a man of few words, and when he spoke, you listened. That evening, though, something was different. A strange curiosity, sharp and insistent, pulled at me like a physical tether. The sun was bleeding through the canopy, painting the forest floor in hues of orange and deep purple. My favorite toy, a small wooden soldier Grandpa had carved for me, slipped from my pocket and rolled, impossibly, right under a gap in that very stone wall. I hesitated for only a moment. It was my soldier. I couldn't leave him. I squeezed through the crumbling gap, the rough stones scraping my shirt. The air on the other side was immediately colder, the light dimmer, as if the sun itself was afraid to trespass here. The familiar sounds of the woods, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of squirrels were gone. All I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart and the whisper of the wind through leaves that sounded less like a rustle and more like a warning. My little soldier lay just a few feet away, resting against the base of a tree whose bark was unnaturally dark, almost black. As I reached for it, a scent hit me, overpowering the pine and soil. It was the smell of rot, of wet leaves left to decay for 1,000 years, mixed with something else, something metallic and sickly sweet like old blood. My fingers brushed against the soldier, and that's when I felt it. A pressure on my ankle. I looked down, thinking I'd snagged my foot on a root, but what I saw wasn't a root. It was long and thin and pale, like a bone wrapped in damp gray flesh. It was a hand, but not a human hand. The fingers were too long, jointed in too many places, and they were tipped with what looked like yellowed, broken claws. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I tried to scream, but the sound was trapped in my throat, a choked, wet gurgle. The grip tightened, the claws digging into the soft skin above my sock. I kicked, thrashed, but the arm was impossibly strong, like iron wrapped in cold clay. It didn't pull me down. It pulled me sideways, away from the wall, deeper into the suffocating twilight of the forbidden woods. I scraped my hands on the forest floor, my nails filling with dirt and grime as I clawed for purchase, for anything to hold on to. But there was nothing. Twigs snapped, leaves crunched, and the world became a blur of dark trunks and deepening shadows as it dragged me. I remember the feeling of my back bumping over roots, the sting of branches whipping across my face. The thing made no sound, no grunt of effort, no guttural snarl. There was only the relentless, silent pulling and the sound of my own ragged, terrified breaths. I twisted my head, catching a glimpse of it. It was hunched, its form vaguely humanoid but stretched and wrong, like a poorly remembered nightmare. Its skin was the color of old mushrooms, slick and mottled with dark patches. It had no face that I could see, just a smooth, blank expanse of flesh where features should have been. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the marrow, that it was aware of me. It could feel my terror, and it was feeding on it. We were moving faster now. The trees were a solid wall of blackness, the last vestiges of twilight swallowed by the canopy. The cold was seeping into my bones, a deep, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. My small body was exhausted, my struggles becoming weaker. A sense of awful resignation began to settle over me. This was it. This was where I would die, dragged into the dark by a faceless monster. My thoughts turned to my grandfather, to the warm light of his kitchen, the smell of his pipe tobacco, the safety I had so foolishly left behind. A sob finally escaped me, a thin, pathetic sound in the vast, hostile silence, and then a sound cut through the woods, a single sharp crack like a rifle shot. It wasn't, though. It was Grandpa Joe's axe splitting a log for the fire. The sound was distant, but it was a sound from my world, from the world of warmth and safety. It was a beacon. That sound seemed to startle the creature. Its grip on my ankle loosened for a fraction of a second. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With a surge of adrenaline I didn't know I possessed, I brought my other foot around and stomped down, hard on the pale, grotesque hand. There was a noise then, a wet snapping sound followed by a shriek that was not of this world. It was a high-pitched, grating wail, like metal grinding on bone, and it vibrated through the very air around me. The hand released me instantly. I didn't wait. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my ankle, and I ran. I ran blindly, fueled by pure, primal fear. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I knew if I saw it again, my legs would give out. My heart would simply stop. Branches tore at my clothes and skin. Roots threatened to trip me with every frantic step. But I didn't slow. Behind me, the shrieking continued, filled with a pain and rage that was utterly inhuman. I could hear it crashing through the undergrowth, its movements clumsy and enraged now. It was following me. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw it, a lurching, pale silhouette against the deepening dark, its long limbs flailing as it staggered in my direction. The sight propelled me forward with renewed terror. I saw a faint break in the trees ahead, the stone wall. Hope, fierce and desperate, flared in my chest. I threw myself at the gap, tumbling through to the other side, landing hard on the familiar soft moss of my grandfather's woods. I didn't stop. I kept crawling, then stumbling to my feet, running until the warm, yellow light of the cabin porch spilled through the trees. I burst through the back door sobbing, covered in dirt, scratches, and blood. Grandpa Joe dropped his newspaper and was at my side in an instant. I couldn't form words. I could only point a shaking finger back towards the dark woods and babble incoherently. He didn't need an explanation. He saw the raw terror in my eyes, the deep gouges on my ankle. He grabbed his heavy hunting rifle from the rack above the door, his face a mask of grim determination I had never seen before. He told me to lock the door and not open it for anyone, not even him, until he came back. Then he stepped out into the night, the heavy click of the bolt action echoing in the sudden silence. I spent the longest hour of my life huddled under the kitchen table listening. I heard nothing for a long time. No crashing, no shrieking, not even the sound of my grandfather's footsteps. Then, there were two loud bangs from the rifle, one right after the other, echoing through the hills. The sound made me jump, and I clamped my hands over my ears, tears streaming down my face. After that, there was only silence. A deep, profound silence that felt even more terrifying than the shrieking had. When Grandpa Joe finally came back, he looked older, tireder than I had ever seen him. He didn't say a word about what happened. He just cleaned the wounds on my ankle, bandaged them tightly, and put me to bed. He sat in a chair in the corner of my room all night, the rifle resting across his knees. We never spoke of it again. I never went near the stone wall again. We sold the cabin a few years later after he passed away. But I still have the scars on my ankle, faded white lines against my skin. And every time I see a forest at dusk, every time the wind whispers through the trees, I feel that cold, bony grip, and I remember the silent, faceless thing that dragged me into the forest,